somebody is tracking it. Now, this is one of the things that you have to consider when it comes to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin can be tracked. Remember, we're talking about digital currency. We're not talking about something physical that can be passed from person to person, and it kind of loses that privacy, or it kind of loses that anonymity because it's attached to somebody. When it comes to something being digital, you have more of a track record because you can tie things to something digitally. And this is one of the reasons why Bitcoin, from its conception, was never anonymous. Now, maybe you've heard a whole lot in terms of Bitcoin being anonymous because of the early days, because you say, hey, Bitcoin was only used by criminals. Now, this is true that Bitcoin was used by criminals in the early days, and this is one of the ways that a lot of people heard about Bitcoin. But you always hear this in terms of sensational news that is always being in the forefront of anything else as in terms of good news. Now, you heard this a whole lot because of the dark web, for instance, and in terms of a website in terms of called the Silk Road, being one of those websites that use Bitcoin predominantly in terms of making payments on that to buy any kind of illegal goods and services. Now, if you think about it, how did they shut down Silk Road? How did they arrest the founder for Silk Road in terms of capturing them based off of this anonymous payments? Now, they did a lot of things that they needed to do in terms of trying to mask their identity in terms of the users and in terms of the founder, in terms of designing the website in a particular way that it kind of obscured a lot of those details. But they were still able to track down this particular founder and arrest them. Have you ever heard about the word metadata in terms of information that's attached to a digital item? Now, in terms of photo, for instance, when you take a photo on a social media platform, there's a lot of information that is tied to that specific photo. For instance, who took that photo in terms of your camera information being attached to that photo when you upload it, and then your profile information is attached to that photo. For instance, your location, a person that you tag inside of that photo. All of that information is inside of that metadata when it comes to that specific photo. Of course, we all know that in terms of Google or in terms of Facebook, in terms of selling a lot of information or selling a lot of information about you to advertisers, that's because they have a lot that is attached to that specific product or that specific file, and they can now tell a whole lot about you, and now that they can also identify exactly who you are and your patterns. If you want to own any kind of Bitcoin, then you have to go through an online exchange. But these online exchange must comply with governmental regulations. Now, governmental regulations like, for instance, KYC, which is Know Your Customer, where you must identify yourself when you're on the exchange, and AML, which is anti-money laundering laws. Now, when it comes to an exchange, and it comes to Bitcoin being 100% digital, they can attach a little piece of information to that Bitcoin. And that information can be your profile and who you are, and attaching it to that Bitcoin, so they know that when you buy or you send that money out to another public address, they know that it came directly from you, and they can track it in the future. One of the largest companies when it comes to tracking Bitcoin and its transactions is Chain Analysis. This is a blockchain forensic analysis company that does a lot when it comes to tracking the movements of cryptocurrency.
Move money around anonymously.
It's harder to trace and it's so anonymous.
And untraceable.
People like to think that Bitcoin is anonymous.
Good afternoon.
But buried in last month's special counsel indictment of 12 alleged Russian spies is an explanation of how law enforcement tracked and identified the suspects using their cryptocurrency transactions.
The defendants used a network of computers around the world, and they paid for it using cryptocurrencies.
One blockchain developer was also able to trace Bitcoin purchases back to Russia's intelligence agency, the GRU, using only public information. He agreed to show Vice News how almost anyone with a Bitcoin wallet could do something similar.
It is not a good idea to commit crime with Bitcoin, because the moment you have one single weak link in your operational security, all of your history is now exposed. As we've seen in case after case, indictment after indictment, where they're shutting down drug trading, exchanges that are operating illegally, it's not just traceable, it's trivial to trace these things.
The Russian agents working on behalf of the GRU used Bitcoin as part of the Mueller investigation.
Exactly, as part of the Mueller investigation. It lists out several counts. Count 10 very specifically talks about how these Russian operatives from the GRU used Bitcoin, amongst other cryptocurrencies, to buy services needed to perform the alleged hacking. There was a very specific call out for a certain transaction amount that occurred on a specific date. And when you went back into the blockchain and looked at it, you can literally say, all right, there was a transaction for 0.026043 Bitcoin. That's a very specific number, right?
So you're saying that because you looked in the indictment and saw the exact amount of Bitcoin that they used, that Russian agent was the only one to spend that exact amount of Bitcoin in that 24-hour period.
Right, exactly.
At that time. What if you wanted to trace back my Bitcoin payments? Do you think you could do that?
If you gave me some starting data, yes.
So let's try it.
Okay.
So I think I have like $30 in Bitcoin here.
Sure.
So this VPN here costs $4.95.
That's a very specific Bitcoin amount. It's already on the blockchain. This is the destination you sent it to. This is the address it was sent from. I can see that this wallet actually had transfers of Bitcoin from this wallet here, an intermediate wallet. This is not exactly a normal address. If you look at the number of transactions, it has 118 transactions related to it. And in fact, this looks like Coinbase. The first thing a law enforcement might do is say, okay, this looks like an exchange. I should go see if I have a record of this and any other transactions we've looked at. If it is an exchange, we go subpoena the exchange. Suddenly, I know your name and address because you had to submit your driver's license to start buying the coin in the first place.
So because all these transactions are listed and they're all verified by encryption and
Hello, this is Scott Montgomery of the Small Town Mercer. Welcome. I just showed my videos about, I think, a couple of the biggest so-called illegal problems that are associated with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in general. And as you can see, I think I debunked them. I hope I did. But if I didn't, I'm just going to add on a little bit to what I showed you previously. So I just ran those consecutive currencies cold. And so I'm just going to go over it here. So cryptocurrency, you've got money laundering and you've got the investment issue. First of all, as you saw in the video, the money laundering is the biggest, I think, hoax at this point as far as cryptocurrency is concerned. Oh yeah, they can hide money, they can just dump money into the cryptocurrency and you'll never be able to trace it. Well, let me ask you a question. Would it be harder to, let's say a person buys drugs and you pull the person over and you have the drugs in his car and you have an arrest and you want to find out where he got it or whatever, you know? So would it be easier to trace the cash or to trace a crypto transaction? All right, so cash, everybody uses cash in today's world. You give cash, you get cash. Is it obvious who you got the cash from? No, not really. Is it obvious who you gave the cash to? Maybe. Okay, so, but yet, sometimes those criminals are found. Sometimes you can trace the transactions. Well, suppose we don't live in a cash world anymore. We live in a crypto world. So you have Bitcoin, or let's say you have altcoin. Okay? So I'll just write down altcoin. Right here. Okay? So how did you buy the drugs if you don't have cash anymore? Well, you bought them using altcoin, did you not? So, you know about how much the drugs cost. I mean, I think most detective agencies on a police force kind of know what they cost. Or maybe you can get the information out of the person who's cooperating, let's say, to get a lesser sentence or whatever. I don't know. But let's say in general you know what it costs. You know where you arrested him. You probably assume if you know the criminal or you know the person, maybe he's got a history and maybe he's frequents a certain, or maybe he has not been known to frequent a certain area or spend his money in a certain place. So you assume he's a drug dealer or a drug user, so he probably got it fairly recently. Would it not be easy to look for that transaction on the blockchain and follow the leads and see where they lead to? And maybe they lead to Joe the drug dealer or a certain line of transactions that go maybe to where drugs are known to come from. And then you can put it all together there. That's how they found the people in the Mueller report. All right, they found them all that way. So they didn't just find one or two and have to waste time breaking one down or breaking another down to see if you can get information on who sold who and who did what. They have the whole transaction right there. So actually, and I think in most cases, it's going to be a lot easier to stop money laundering or to find criminals than it would be in a cash world. All right? So that's one thing. What about the old Ray Dalio argument, right? Well, you can't use Bitcoin. You can't spend it anywhere. It's only a speculative investment. At least gold has some kind of cash value or something. Okay. Well, how often do you spend cash? How often do you use a card? How often does money increase in value or currency increase in value? So, like I said in a previous video, next year is my house going to be $100,000 less because the dollar is gaining in value over every other asset? Is bread going to be 30 cents an ounce or a loaf, sorry, next year or and 15 cents the year after that? A loaf? I doubt it. So I don't think money is gaining in value. Anyway, just a thought. This has been Scott Montgomery for the Small Town Mercer. Again, eventually I believe everybody's going to be using cryptocurrency. We already see banks. Well, banks don't use it. Well, JP Morgan now does, and so do other banks. PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa now use it. So good luck with that argument. And anyway, we'll see you in my next video. Have a blessed day.